Hi, this is Kevin Pawlowski from Paradise Found Studio, and today we're going to kind of go in a different direction. So instead of more the visual arts, we're going to get it more into the theater and literature direction, talking to Cole Matson, and he's the managing director at Open Window Theater, also vice president of Catholic Artists Connection, and he studied theater and theology in New York, England, and Scotland. So this guy's been around, so I'm really excited to get into this.
So Cole, we originally met through the Catholic Artists Connection, and so tell me about your involvement with that group.
I was in New York and working with my friend Emily Snyder, who's a playwright and director, and we were trying to think of a way to help connect the Catholic artist community, both locally and nationally. So we just started in May 2017 with this email newsletter, the Catholic Artist Connection, which goes out every Tuesday. And so we thought we'd put together a website which shared Catholic arts organizations in the city, parishes which had artist outreaches or were particular hubs for artists to gather, so that our three main activities would be the website and the newsletter, in-person socials, which we started to do a few times a year, and in-person retreats.
So you're highly influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. What's drawn you to their work over the years?
Just seeing this story of these four little hobbits who experience setback after setback after setback and keep on with hope, standing up to the challenge of great things that they're asked to do, which is beyond anyone's imagination. That just inspired my imagination for the kind of person I wanted to be.
So at Oxford, you were a scholar in residence at C.S. Lewis's home, the Kilns. You actually slept in the same room where he died. So how was that experience?
That was honestly one of the best years of my life. Applied to Oxford, got in, applied to the program, and they gave me a residency. And I just picked the music room because that was one of the rooms that was smaller and cheaper, and turned out to be the room where he had died. I joked with guests who came through the house that I felt like I had the ghost of a Don, with a whip over my shoulder saying, write your essay. But really, the house has a really wonderful, warm feel. And it was a very inspiring place to be able to do my first year of studying theology. So it was just a year of reading theology, reading a lot of these writers, patristic writers, New Testament scholars for the first time, writing my thoughts about them and responses and analyzing them, and praying at the Oxford chaplaincy and walking around Oxford and the 8 acres behind C.S. Lewis's house in the woods, and just soaking in the environment of the Kilns.
So you originally were going to write a dissertation on audience abuse. And so I was curious what you had in mind for that topic.
First, I looked at my hero, C.S. Lewis. So when I was at Oxford, I did a thesis on C.S. Lewis on the moral responsibility of the artist. And one of the things he talks about is this view of the artist as a Mahatma, a great soul, as somebody who's inherently better than everyone else. And that got me thinking about the relationship between the artist and the audience, and how the artist sees the audience. So if I'm the great soul and you're less than you are an object for me to manipulate. What I started off doing was reading journal articles and reviews of theater companies where I felt like they in some way forcibly manipulated the audience, or were verbally or physically abusive toward audience members, or in some way took away audience members' rights. So a lot of this stuff.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just curious. So can you give me an example of abusing an audience? I'm struggling. I'm trying to connect the dots there.
One example was a show called Audience, which was at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I had read a review of the show. A cameraman on stage, there's a big video screen, and he would pan the audience so their faces were up on the screen. And then an actor would walk out on stage, and he would pick a young woman in one of the first few rows. The camera would focus in on her, and the actor would start to verbally abuse her. So he would start to tell her that, she was, I don't know what your language requirements on the show are, but, that she was a bitch, or, she was a horrible person. He could tell she had no friends. She just looked mean and nasty just by looking at her. He could tell she was no good. And generally, she would get so flustered being attacked for no reason that she would start to cry, as anyone would. And then when she got that upset, he would say, okay, well, I'll stop as long as you agree to spread your legs for the camera. At which point, generally, at least one audience member would start to boo, and the audience would turn against him. The director, in an interview, said what he was trying to do was he was trying to force an audience member to become a white knight for a damsel in distress. So his assumption, which a lot of these artists I was studying had, is that as the actor, I'm active. As the audience, you're passive. And if you're passive in this theatrical relationship, you must therefore be passive in your regular life. So I, as the active artist, need to wake you up and force you to action, which is absurd. Because if I'm an audience member in a show, what you've done is we've created a social contract. You've said you're going to entertain me or teach me or inspire me or whatever. You're in some way going to give value to my life. And I trust you to take me through a story or take me through an experience. And I'm giving you the space to do that. My sitting there and watching you, actually, Peter Brook would say, giving you my active attention and assisting in your performance through my attention and energy is an active thing. So by these artists turning around and critiquing me for giving you that space is morally unjust and unfair.
So you make a point that there's no hard line between faith-based theater and regular theater. Certainly, a lot of the theater out there is secular, and some people could consider some of it even profane. How do you make that connection?
I've just noticed that whenever we talk about faith-based theater or Christian theater, it's really hard to identify. It's hard when we talk about something like open window theater, for example, and we use the phrase, we do redemptive theater, because while all of us who are on the board or our full-time staff are Christian, the theater itself is not a project of the Catholic Church. It's in terms of the hierarchical church. Now, you could say it's a project of the Catholic Church because we're all Catholics, so therefore we're members of the church. So anything that are our projects are projects of the church. It's somewhat easier to define in terms of audience or location. So a play which is done in a church or a Christian school, you might say, well, that's Christian theater because it's done in a Christian space for Christian audiences. But if the same play is done off Broadway at Playwrights Horizons, that's known as, one of the premier secular theaters of New York City. What I found more fruitful is to look at the people who are doing theater, and is there a particular way of doing theater, which is how a Christian should do theater, which may overlap with the ways an atheist does theater, because a lot of it is just based on the natural moral law of loving each other and being kind to each other and respecting each other. A lot of it really depends on the context. So I guess, that's kind of the best definition I could give right now, is a way of doing theater in which faith is a conscious part of its creation versus a way of doing theater which doesn't necessarily engage with faith consciously.
The cynical side of these things is, of course, the marketing side. Is you've got to, I'm sure you guys sit around and say, well, how far do we push this? Because, of course, if you're Catholic production, you're going to have a whole lot of Protestants, especially more on the fundamental side, that are not ever going to go in there. And if you're even religious, it may turn off folks that either atheist or agnostic or just don't want to be preached to. They're worried about being preached to. That's got to go in some of the discussions you have.
I think it's important for a theater to determine who their audience is. So in our founder's previous company, his audience was the Catholic Church. So he wanted to encourage fellow Catholics. So he did his shows in churches and Catholic schools and in Catholic gatherings like World Youth Day. In this new company, he decided he wanted to reach the wider theater audience, including non-Christians. In our communications, we're open about our faith because we want to be a place in which faith can be talked about openly. So we had, in our previous production, a couple Muslim actors, and they said they felt comfortable in our space because they could be open about their faith, which they appreciated. So we want everybody to be open about their faith and about faith in general in our productions in our environment, which is going to turn off and does turn off some people who are not open to Christian faith or have had negative experiences with it. So we're trusting that through the quality of our productions and our reputation for being a warm and friendly and welcoming environment, both for audience members and for artists, that eventually we'll win over some of those people.
The Open Window Theater website states you guys focus on the redemptive vision in the arts, that you believe in a crisis of hope and true beauty in today's world. How do you anticipate bringing to life that statement in your productions?
Well, primarily in the choice of productions. So This World Over is about a man who grew up alone on an island, comes to believe he's a lost prince of this mythical kingdom called Gilderay, which everyone tells him doesn't exist, and goes on a quest the world over to find and save his people. He has a lot of adventures. He starts off very idealistic, has that wonderful line, we're all of us meant to mark the earth with our feet so that the world is better for us having been here. We are all of us meant to be heroes. And then end of Act 1, things take a very bad turn for him. So it's this movement of, having, losing, and finding again in a new way, which is the story of death and resurrection. That is the story we want to tell in all of our stories. There's a great line in the play which says, sorrows and losings and fools, there are many in this world, but there are wonders here too, and resurrections. So that is probably the core line for us from that play. New life does come at the end from God.
So you have a play coming up in April, Tolkien, which fits so perfectly into your passions. Can you tell us more about that production and how it came about?
It is the U.S. premiere of this new play, which just premiered in Vancouver, British Columbia in 2018, written by my friend Ron Reed, who is a fantastic theater maker and artistic director. He runs Pacific Theater in Vancouver. It looks at the friendship between Lewis and Tolkien, starting pretty much from when they meet until Lewis's death. So unlike the film with the same name, it doesn't look at Tolkien's youth. No connection to that film. But it's about their friendship and how their friendship spurred their literary greatness. Tolkien wouldn't have published Lord of the Rings if Lewis hadn't encouraged him, because Tolkien thought no one else will like this material. But it also looks at the complicated nature of their friendship. Tolkien didn't particularly appreciate Narnia. Tolkien was not particularly comfortable with Lewis, remaining Anglican, not becoming Catholic, much less marrying a divorcee. So there were these strains to their friendship. So it asks, can a friendship be redeemed when there appear to be all these insuperable challenges? And it's just a beautifully written play. Ron did his research. So I'm really looking forward to sharing it with people to help them better understand not only their work and their lives, but also transfer it to our own experience of friendship and difficulties, places, and people with whom we might have grown apart for various reasons, and giving us hope for being able to heal those relationships.
Cole, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Kevin. God bless your work.
Hey, let's do a quick update, because when I originally recorded the interview with Cole, this was right as the COVID-19 thing was breaking. So a lot of changes since then. Obviously, it's hit the artist community really hard. So Cole's going to give us an update of what's going on.
So the theater did have to shut down on March 13th, but thankfully we are going to be able to launch an in-person season this coming fall, opening October 2nd. We're going to be doing a show called Lolek about the young John Paul II, the world premiere of a new adaptation of A Christmas Carol, The Scrutiny Passion, which is a play about the Passion narratives told in a fresh new way, and our rescheduled production of the U.S. premiere of Tolkien. And it will actually be even more accessible to you viewers because every production will have a streaming option. You can buy a streaming pass, a virtual pass for the entire season, and watch it all from the comfort of your own home. And finally, I have moved on from Open Window Theater as the managing director. I'm staying on the advisory board. This fall, I will actually be visiting monasteries to find one in which to do my own religious formation, with the aim in about a year or two's time of founding a new religious community for artists.
So thanks for joining us today. I want to make sure that you know that there's links in the description for Cole's Tolkien play that's coming up, Open Window Theater. And also just look out at their website for other productions coming up, because a lot of exciting stuff happening. Also, there's a link down there for Catholic Artists Connection as well. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like. I'm trying to build my subscriber base, so please subscribe, pass it on, get other people to subscribe, spread the word. All right, God bless.